Hello, it's June 26th. This is video number 20. I'd like to include a little bit more about my system this morning, my book. A few more interesting things that people haven't learned about yet, how it would work. I want to first of all mention that I put out a hummingbird feeder. Been several years since I've done that, but I've done it this year, and I haven't had any. I must have put it out too early. And then I found I have to change the, the syrup or the nectar. When the weather gets warm, you got to change that regularly, like every couple 3 days. Anyway, so I changed it, and when I got back from a vacation, I didn't have it out there because I was needing to change the nectar, but I put some out there yesterday, and lo and behold, a hummingbird came several times this morning. It was very interesting, right next to my kitchen window. So I really enjoyed that. I want to show. This is my first book, and it's got some quite a few mistakes in it. I was first starting out. That's a black hole. I did a oil painting of that, and took a picture of it. It's on the cover of the book. Endless Cycle Universe. The name of my website is endlesscycleuniverse.com. Anyway, so I've been working on this for a while, and I want to show something in the book. But let me first of all say that this is based on a concept where there's a conveyor system by gravity, where the matter in the region of galaxies is recycling. There would be matter beyond that region. You can't have a curtain or an edge of the universe. It has to go forever. That's beyond our comprehension, but it's more of a problem to have an end out there than to go on forever. And it looks like it goes on forever. I actually believe that there is a limited number of photons. There would be photons way past the area where galaxies, way out there. Still, and they would be coming in, being drawn by gravity. Some of them are actually circulating as radiation. That's where you get cosmic microwave background radiation. Some of that stuff is actually traveling at light speed and circling around and then returning. I'm not going to talk about all that here. What I want to show is my universe model. Here's my particle system, by the way. And I think I've already showed that. But here's the latest drawing of my universe model. You've got a central collection. You have a symmetrical arrangement of galaxies on both sides. They're traveling out. They're expanding. The galaxies are moving apart as they move out. They actually come out. They fire out in two opposite directions from the collection. When the collection gets enough mass, compression causes them to, some of them to erupt into space through two opposite side ports, and these come out. When they do that, okay, they shoot out in a straight line, then they start to move apart. Why they move apart, I realized in much better, I used to say it was analogous to a fountain shooting straight up in the air over a gravity source like the Earth, and that's a great way to envision it. But what I really realized, or what I came to realize was causing it, in August of 2016, I did this drawing here. These photons coming out of the center of this thing, the center would have, my system has a 13 particle system, and the center would have the white particle, which is the highest charge, and then you have the pink, and then you have the red, then you have the red-orange, then the orange, then the yellow-orange, then the yellow, then the yellow green, then the green, then the blue green, then the blue, then the dark blue, then the black. There's 13. And as they come up out of this collection, now this is what I wanted to show in my first book, because even though I made some mistakes in my first book, and I was working on it in 2007 and 2008, and then published it in the spring or early summer of 2008. This is what I came up with at first. You would have a spherical, natural, uncharged photon. At first I came up with a 6-particle system. Then later it became a 12-particle system. And then finally settled on a 13-particle system, and I was satisfied that that was what was needed to represent everything that happens. But anyway, you would have compression in an enormous collection. It's a black hole. The compression, see, spheres have a lot of space between them. When you have the stacking of spheres, there's quite a bit of space between them. I'd have to go back and check how much space is between them if you have spheres stacked. But compression would cause them to become more cube shaped. If you could actually make those spheres, compress them into cubes, then you would have no space between them. That's what compression would do. And that's what happens inside a collection like that with photons. The gravity is pulling across one side to the other and all that, and it's compressing its core. The core is more compressed than those. It compresses the photons in the center and near the center more than those on the surface. And this is the concept that I first started out with and I retain to this day. The perfectly spherical black in my system is uncharged. It's on the surface of that monster. And then the dark blue would be the next charge. It was just a blue when I did the 6-particle system. But it's a little bit more cubic. I drew these by hand, so they're not perfect. The next is the green, and then the next charge is the yellow, and then the next is the red, and then you have the white, which is the highest charge. You know, now there's a pink between the white and the red, and of course there's between the red and the yellow, there's a red orange and an orange and a yellow orange. So there's 3 between those two. I've already mentioned that, so I won't go over it again. But they become more cube shaped. The reason they burst out into space is because their natural shape is a sphere, and they are flexing back to wanting to be spheres again. That's what gives them the energy to burst out into space, is they're trying to flex back into spheres. And so the more mass the collection gets, they finally burst out into space. Now, so this system is not the Big Bang, because everything's recycling. Everything has always existed. They're not coming out of a speck needing to get mass. Technically, it's not an explosion. It's material jetting out. Now, when this was also done in 2016, this goes with this one. Now, the reason galaxies would spread is because, I may have already explained this in a video, but I'm going to cover it again a little bit. The whites and the pink, which come out of the center, furthermost centered photons in that collection. It takes a lot of time if they're moving at light speed when they're coming out, all of these, it takes a long time just to get to the surface of this thing. And a lot of them, when they get out into space, because the gravity is so intense, most of them fall back. But some of them do escape. And that's what this is showing right here. Those that gain enough distance being pushed by those behind them. as this is as they are being forced out into space, one against another. Most of it falls back. That's what those arrows are about. Those that make it out into space and keep going, you have the different colors of representing the charges. The centermost would be the white, the highest charge, comes from the deepest inside the collection. And then you have the pinks next to those. And then, and these are what make this, these are the centermost photons inside protons and neutrons. And neutrons is the white. They're the fewest of those. Around those are the pinks. There's a lot more pinks. And those make the center unit in protons. And when they come out into space, the blacks, which are way out here, uncharged blacks, and then there would be low charged blues, which I think I've got, couldn't draw everything. So I've got, I think that's a blue right there, and each other charged. Those are supposed to be like these, but I showed the black, you know, but there's only one, and then I don't show them. They would be like this, like the blacks are, and like the whites and the pinks are. But I just showed the graduation of the charges up to the blacks because there isn't that much room on this page. So as these come out, they repel one another extremely, and this makes them spread out. And so the whites are moving away from one another, then the pinks too, and they're all moving away. As they do, the blacks are highly attracted to them by charge contrast, and what they do is the blacks follow the pinks and the white individuals, and then they try to attach. But when they're so attracted that when they collide, there's no way they can attach, and so the blacks keep following them and then keep colliding into them. This keeps pushing them even further out. And gradually they're going to achieve the same velocity, and then they can attach. So that's how protons and neutrons, the center units in them, are made. And then the reds in the system are what's making, in the same way, are making the positrons. And the positrons will attach around those as they're made. And that's what makes protons and neutrons. It's possible you can make protons and neutrons out of some other, some beta electrons could make, because there's nothing that's going to tell these things that you can't make this or that. Everything is, this is a naturalist. This is the system envisioned by a naturalist. It is a naturalistic system. Everything has to have a natural explanation. You can't dictate to it what it's going to do. It's going to do, these things are going to do whatever they want to do naturally. That's what they're going to do. So all protons and neutrons don't necessarily have positrons, 14 positrons surrounding a center unit. There could be some that have the 40, in my system, the 43 beta electron surrounding them, more of those instead of the other. It's possible. I'm not going to disallow any possibility here. There's a lot of things that have been measured in science with regard to protons and neutrons and their behavior, and sometimes, there may be a percent of protons that have a different makeup than others. Now, they may behave basically the same, but and then when you have radioactivity going on, you have things colliding, there's maybe a certain percent of protons that have a different makeup than others. And so you have this, some of them might transform into being more like a neutron, or it would be more likely that a neutron could have a little different makeup, and then it could transform by enough radioactivity occurring over a period of time that it changes to be more like a proton. I think that's more likely, but I'm just telling you the basis of this system so you can see that it's a it has reasons for viewing the universe in this way. Very good reasons, and it would work. It does work. So there's the latest universe model where things spew out into space, and opposite doesn't show the other side because there's not enough paper to show that. And they come out and they spread, and then they turn like a comet does in relation to the sun. Basically, these galaxies are made out of, the protons, the neutrons. Then you have electrons coming around them and orbiting, or radio particles, etc., making their shells. And then you have atoms forming, and then you have, coalescing happening. You have stars forming. You have planets forming. And they make galaxies, and then there's black holes out there. Some of this material, when it comes out, is such that it would make a black hole immediately. I'm not going to go into that, but there are black holes out there. Even like Oppenheimer said, small black holes form when a star explodes. That's a good. There's no reason not to accept that either. So that's another way black holes would begin. And black holes, all they do is pull in matter and tear it down and break it into its digits and assimilate it. That's all they do. So, you could have a small black hole, and it could gradually get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it could be the center black hole, and it could be a supermassive black hole eventually inside of that's organizing an entire galaxy of stars around it by its gravity. So that's more about the system. I was going to show how this looked, and this is also in the book. It's more about those background microwave radiation and how that works. This one is an earlier drawing of the universe model. This is a 3D pencil drawing that I did that I believe is in the book, the first book. Here's a drawing that is similar to the one that is in the first book in the Cycle Universe, but it's a little later version. I did a pencil drawing in the Cycle Universe. Now you have to remember that as far as the first book is concerned, that I was a rank amateur, a rookie at all of this. I needed a lot of time working on these concepts, refining them, checking them against good information. So, the first book has the concepts that I retained, that everything has mass that exists, and that a negative charge does not exist. And the collection, the spewing out into opposite directions, all of that is from the first book. And then the shape, the compression of the photons into becoming more cube shaped, and that's the reason that these photons burst out into space in opposite directions and eventually form galaxies. And then all of this is recycling. I will mention one more thing about this. There is a point where the system could be overloaded. I mean, right now you would have these basically almost like a halo of galaxies that are spreading out, and then they're turning around and going back to the source, the gravity source, and they're being reassimilated. And then I think that when you have say a gamma ray, no, sorry. Quasar, sorry. When you have a quasar, I think what's probably causing that is when these galaxies and these black holes get larger and larger the farther they travel, and these galaxies are accelerating more and more as they return to the source, and this is why some of them are moving away at such a high rate, because they're increasing their velocity because they're falling toward it. And when you have anything falling, it accelerates. But when they get close to the source where they're going to be torn down and assimilated into that gravity source, there's going to be some extreme collisions, and I believe that those collisions would be great enough to cause quasars. I believe that's probably what's happening with quasars. But there is a point, and I wanted to mention this too. There is a point where, see, this system is not only bringing back microwave background radiation that's traveling at light speed, but it's also pulling in more and more photons from distances away. And so there's a point where right now you'd have these halos of material with galaxies that are expanding, turning around, coming back, and then there's a point where they have to collapse, and then there's collisions, and then that stuff is assimilated back into the collection. But so you'd have these different intervals between the spewed matter into space, and that's right. So there would be groups of galaxies that were in the same material that was spewed into space at a different time. Then you have several billion years past, maybe 39 billion or something like that, and then another group would be spewed into space and make another group of galaxies. And so you would have galaxies, groups of galaxies, one ahead of another in this conveyor system by gravity that's pulling it back in. And there might be, I don't know, 6 of these groups out there right now, one after another, with space in between them because they're spewed into space at a different time. Anyway, there's a point where if you're going to have photons from very far away continually being pulled into this system, and it increases with mass, then it's spewing. The more mass it has, the more frequently it would spew this material into space. And then there's a point where it becomes overloaded, untold number of years, a quadrillion, many trillion, who knows. But there's a point where the thing would explode. And I think I mentioned that in my book, but there is a point where it would explode. And then when it does, it disperses this material back out into space. And then it has to start all over again. So that's a pretty recent development in this system, and I wanted to mention that. It's not something that I just wanted to make up and just say, okay, this helps the thing to work. No, it really makes sense. It really, really does. I actually accept that. But that is a later development. And so that way, everything continues to recycle, and it has, it pretty much makes a perfect cycle where it's just ongoing forever and ever and ever and ever and ever.